Okay, let's see. Spending Affordability Committee, page 8. There is a recommendation to take a look at the private insurance for this. Treasurer's office should investigate this and get back to us about how that could effectively be done. Second important issue, I think, has to do with the state investment portfolio. This is like the state's checkbook. For a sense of how big this is, in December, the balance was $19 billion. That's billion with a B. So this is a substantial amount of money that the Treasurer's office manages. On page 9 is exhibit number 6, and what this shows is what the returns are on the fund and what the target return is. First, I do want to say this, that the fund is very limited as to what it can invest in, which is obviously the case because the goal of this, the number one goal is you wake up every morning with at least as much money as you had the day before, which I think that's how I manage my checkbook at least, so I want to make sure there's no leakage there. And so this is never really going to be a big source of revenue. That said, they do want to at least keep it in line with the 90-day U.S. Treasury rate, which is a common benchmark. It's also sometimes referred to as the risk-free rate. And so what that is that's the bars that you see there are the benchmark. The line that you see is what the investments portfolio's return has been. For a few years, it was above, and now it's a little bit below. There's actually a fairly clear explanation as to what that is in the early 2000s, or 2020s, I should say, a lot of money was invested in longer-term bonds. Longer-term bonds have longer-term fixed rates, which if interest rates stay low is going to get you above the line, which we saw when the interest rates were low. Interest rates increase, you're still on the lower level fixed. That's being worked through, but that explains the difference between those two, the lines and the bars there. A final observation is the Maryland 529 program, which is new to the Treasurer's office, a few years new, that is. It's got some 3 components. One is the college investment plan. The other is the college trust, which has been closed now for new participants. And there's also the ABLE program. With this, I think a key thing to do, if you look at Exhibit 7 on page 11, is advertising. People need to know about this program in order to participate in it. So what's interesting is how advertising has changed in recent years. The graph there shows on the left hand is in thousands what television, radio, and website traffic was, or advertisement was, and that's in thousands. On the right side is digital advertising, and that's in tens of thousands. So the yellow bar is the digital. So if I did it all on one side, the yellow would so dwarf the others that you wouldn't even see those lines hardly. So what I've done is I've used the 2 scales. And so what you got to do when you look at the yellow one, you got to multiply it by 10. And so in 2019, you've got about 5,000 impressions through digital advertising. So it's right in the middle of the pack there. By 2020, the yellow is about the same as the television advertising. But then you got to multiply it by 10, so it's about 10 times as much as it. So 2019 is about the same, about 10 times in 2020, and now there's about 90,000 digital advertisement impressions going on each year, as opposed to about 1,000 to 3,000 for the others. So there's been a real shift here in how they are advertising. And why would they advertise? Page 12, exhibit number 8 shows, I think, probably if there's one indicator that is useful, it would be the how many unique beneficiaries are there. How many people are benefiting from this? A second thing I would point out too is what the annual contributions are. They've been going up. So there has been a steady growth in this program as more people have been taking advantage of it. And with the exception of 2023, I'm not sure why, the investment went down, but it generally tends to go up. And so that's a quick review of that program. Recommendation from DLS is to concur. There are some audit issues on page 14. And with that, I will conclude my remarks and take questions.
Thank you for the analysis. Colleagues, any questions for the analyst? Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for all those explanations. On page 6, on Exhibit 3, As I look at this, every single year since 2018, the red bars have exceeded the blue, meaning the claims close has exceeded the claims process, new claims process. So it looks like every year, and these last few years especially, more claims have been closing than have been opening. So it sounds like they're catching up on a backlog, but at the same time, from the black line, there's more still open claims and maybe more are coming. But it sounds like they're doing a good job if they're closing more than are coming in each year. So what has been happening? What is the story behind that?
Well, I mean, the quick response, I think, is you're correct. They have been doing it. They're obviously, with the pandemic, there was less activity, less claims, and they're managing it and keeping it up. What I thought is a little curious is that with more claims closing, you kind of hope that that line would go down, but they say somehow they're threading the needle, that they're closing some, and also there is some claims are closed more quickly than others. Things where there's court cases or there's bodily harm and things like that. So some case, how long it takes for each case to close, it can vary quite a bit too. Okay. And so they're threading the needle.
All right, well, thank you. Yeah, no, it looks like they're doing a good job there. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you, Delegate Kaiser, for the question. Okay, seeing no other questions from the committee, and thank you to the analysts, we're going to move towards to the treasurer. Would Treasurer Davis please join us, along with, I believe, Jonathan Martin, Joyce Miller, and Keith Morris, who are here for questions if we have them. So, whenever you're ready, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've been through these before on both sides of the table, so I think I may know how this is supposed to go. So let me say this. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Frank for just a outstanding job that he did in reviewing our situation, reviewing our budget. There were a number of questions that were presented to us. Well, three questions and some inquiries about 529. We have a detailed response that we provided to each of you all on that. I would let it rest there unless there are questions about that, and we're happy to go into that in more detail. But I know, in interest of your time, I wasn't gonna restate everything unless you wanted us to.
Treasurer Davis, thank you for being thorough as usual. I appreciate the written testimony. Colleagues, are there any questions for the treasurer? Delegate Kaiser.
I do not have that written testimony in my file of things, so just want to make sure I get it later.
We will make sure that you have it before the end of the day, Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's an error on our end. We'll get that to you. Colleagues, any other questions for the treasurer? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Treasurer, for being here. We appreciate the work that you do. Next, we're going to move on to the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. The budget analyst, Ms. Madeline Miller, whenever you're ready. The witnesses that were here for the Treasurer's Office were from the Treasurer's Office. Yeah, just for the record, those who are watching. Ms. Miller, whenever you're ready, please.
Miller, and today I'll be presenting the DLS analysis of the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. GOCPP, or GOCAP, is a coordinating office that advises the governor on criminal justice strategies and serves as the state's criminal justice grants administering agency. It plans, promotes, and funds efforts with its partners to advance public policy, enhance public safety, reduce crime and juvenile delinquency, and serve victims. Between fiscal 26 and 27, its budget grows under 1% to $347.7 million. I'll begin with a discussion of its managing for results data on page 4. In this section, there are 3 topics the agency is asked to address. The first MFR topic is the agency's role as a grants administrator. As shown in Exhibit 1 on page 5, most of the grant funding that GOCPP awards each year is to law enforcement and criminal justice agencies for crime prevention programs and to victim services providers. In fiscal 25, approximately 52.6% of the funds awarded were for crime prevention purposes and 33.9% were for victim services providers. The over $285 million spent on grant programs in fiscal 25 went to approximately 1,030 subgrants. As shown in Exhibit 2 on page 6, a slight decrease in the number of grants between fiscal 24 and 25 and an increase in the number of grant monitor positions within the agency led to a reduction in staff workloads in fiscal 25. In fiscal 21 to 24, the workload ratio was 115 to 1. It fell to 73 to 1 in fiscal 25 and is expected to remain lower than that previous level in fiscal 26. One of the ways that GOCPP modified its MFR between the fiscal 25 session and this year is to stop reporting the average time between application due dates and notification of awards, and to instead report the percentage of grants where the award notification was issued prior to the award start date. In fiscal 25, this occurred for about 15% of grants. In its testimony today, written or oral, GOCPP should comment on whether it has a target for the percentage of award notifications issued prior to the award start date for fiscal 26 or future fiscal years. Exhibit 3 on page 7 shows that in both fiscal 24 and 25, 594 unique organizations applied to the agency for funding. Though there were fewer first-time recipients of funding than in fiscal 24, the amount was still higher than the 2021 to 2023 levels in the most recent year of data. GOCPP also reports measures related to oversight of the grants it awards. A similar percentage of grants were in a regular status in fiscal 25 as was in the previous year. Another substituted MFR measure is shown in Exhibit 4 on page 8. GOCPP now reports the percentage of total awards expended at grant closeout instead of the percentage of unused state and federal funds returned each fiscal year. The only 3 years of data are available to compare. This is an efficiency measure for the agency and could suggest that its oversight of grant spending has improved since fiscal 2023, as the percent of award funds expended increased 18 percentage points between those years. Now turning to page 9, GOCPP also provides direct services through its Victim Services Unit, or VSU. Compensation paid to individuals is provided through the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board. Exhibit 5 details CICB claims that were paid in fiscal 24 and 25, the only years of data reported in the most recent MFR submission. Comparable data from CICB annual reports is also shown. There are differences in the MFR data and the data in annual reports, largely due to the point in time that the information was extracted from the agency's Crime Victims Compensation Program database. Using the annual report figures, the number of claims resulting in awards increased 87.4%, and the value of claims paid also increased 31.7%. This increase in claims paid is in advance of the effects of Chapter 705 of 2024, which became effective, or most of its provisions became effective July 1st, 2025. Chapter 705 is anticipated to significantly increase the volume of claims the board receives, in part due to the expansion of eligible crimes and types of expenses, and the removal of certain disqualifiers. Additionally, maximum award limits are also increased. GOCPP should comment on the CICB's workload since the start of fiscal 26 in comparison to recent fiscal years, including for emergency claims. Also within the VSU is the Sexual Assault Reimbursement Unit, which pays claims to medical providers. On page 11, Exhibit 6 shows that in fiscal 25, SARO received 4,110 claims and processed 5,300. The unit has operated with a backlog for several years. Since fiscal 21, the average claim amount rose by 29%. For both CICB and VSU, the agency discontinued several MFR measures between the two most recent submissions, as shown in Exhibit 7 on page 12. The agency should discuss why it discontinued those measures that were newly reported with last year's MFR submission. In addition to altering reporting requirements for CICB, Chapter 705 reduced the amount of time that the board has after the receipt of a claim, and all necessary supporting material is provided. The time period was reduced from 90 days to 30. In fiscal 25, there was an average of 56 days between the date that the CICB received the application and the date of resolution. The third area of performance analysis relates to sexual assault evidence test kit testing. GOCPP uses state funds and, when available, federal funds to increase the number tested in Maryland. Exhibit 8 on page 13 provides the number of kits tested through the National Sexual Assault Kit Initiative and the Sexual Assault Kit Testing Programs. Established by chapters 704 and 705 of 2023 and administered by GOCPP, the Sexual Assault Evidence Collection Kit Reporting Program tracks the location, status, and chain of custody of sexual assault evidence collection kits. A local law enforcement agency or person that had control or possession of a sexual assault evidence collection kit must report location, status, and chain of custody information to this reporting program by the end of March of this calendar year. GOCPP uses a database referred to as Track Kit to support the program. In fiscal 25, there were 1,525 kits entered into this Track Kit, largely for kits collected since May of 2024. As of earlier this month, the number of kits logged in this system was approximately 5,200. The agency reports that roughly 20,000 kits will be logged by the deadline. A discussion of the fiscal 26 budget appears on page 15. A total of $1.3 million was added via legislative priority spending, and funding for these purposes is not continued in the allowance. The allowance also includes 8 proposed deficiencies that add $1.8 million. Those related to personnel and statewide vacancies add approximately $337,000. I'll also highlight that $1 million is added to support SARU and $408,000 for criminal injuries compensation board claims. Moving now to the allowance. A pie chart on page 16 shows how funding will be used across GOCPP's programs. Though the allowance is $347.7 million, the agency has several special fund accounts that are supported through general funds. For these accounts, the budget includes a general fund contribution and planned expenditure from the account. This allows the agency to retain any funds which may have gone unspent or returned to the agency by a grantee to use for the same purpose in a future fiscal year. If that double count is excluded, the agency's total spending power is $315.5 million. Approximately 60% of the allowance is appropriated for various local law enforcement grants. Between the current year and the allowance, the agency's budget has a net increase of $2.2 million, as shown in Exhibit 10 on pages 18 and 19. One of the areas in the allowance where there's a double count is the Performance Incentive Grant Fund. A formula sets the level of general funds GOCPP receives each fiscal year, and unspent or returned funds are retained in an associated special fund account. This special fund currently has a balance, and a provision in this year's BRFA would authorize the transfer of $2 million from that special account to the general fund. With this transfer, the agency projects that the closing balance will be $2.9 million at the end of fiscal 26. Returning to areas of change in the allowance, most changes are driven by grant programming. As shown in Exhibit 11 on page 20, the state aid for police protection formula and enhancement amounts both increase. The formula grows by $1.1 million to $77 million, and the enhancement amount, which is not mandated, increases from $45.9 million to $47.1 million. Between fiscal 23 and 26, GOCPP received an additional $45.9 million to use as an enhancement amount for the SAP program, and awarded it so that jurisdictions received a proportional amount based on violent crime rates from most recently available crime data. Though the fiscal 27 budget again includes the enhancement and the addition of funds for Baltimore City, the most recently available crime data was not used. A comparison between the allowance and what it would look like with the 2024 calendar data can be found in the overview of state aid to local governments report. Committee narrative in the 2025 JCR requested that GOCPP report information on the SAP enhancement and whether any jurisdiction used that enhancement funding differently than SAP formula funds. Enhancement funds are used in the same manner as formula funds, and recipients of SAP absorb the funding into their overall budgets, so more detailed expenditure information is not available on either portion of the funding. Given that the enhancement remains unmandated in fiscal 27, and in light of the state's fiscal condition, DLS recommends deleting the $47.1 million general fund appropriation for SAP enhancement funding. Another grant programming change I'll highlight is the new grant included for the Group Violence Reduction Strategy, or GVRS. GOCAP would use this $2.5 million to provide a grant to the Baltimore City Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. The GVRS is a partnership between the Mayor's Office, the Baltimore City Police Department, and the Baltimore State's Attorney's Office, who work with ROCA, youth advocate programs, and community members to provide focused deterrence services. Many of the partners receive state support through GOCPP and the Department of Juvenile Services, though not specifically for this strategy. In light of the state's current fiscal condition, DLS recommends deleting the 2.5 general fund appropriation for the GVRS grant. Personnel data is shown on page 24. Only 7 positions were vacant at the end of calendar 25, compared with 14 at the end of calendar 24. Spending on regular personnel increases by approximately $1.1 million between fiscal 26 and 27, and spending on contractual personnel decreases by approximately $182,000 due to the conversion of 2.84 contractual positions to regular positions. There are 2 issues to discuss, beginning on page 25. The first relates to the publication of the state's newest 3-year crime plan for 2025 through 2027. It describes 7 areas of focus for the agency, as shown in Exhibit 12. For each of the focus areas, the plan details how GOCPP will use its existing partnerships and programs to address specific goals over the next 3 years. While most measures are not numeric in nature and therefore would not be easy to report through the MFR progress, some are countable. One of the focus areas also relates to measuring crime and its prevention, and that's the quantifiable safety indicator scorecard. The agency is required to create the scorecard by Chapter 350, and the agency anticipates its publication by the end of fiscal 26. Through this scorecard, the agency will also develop indicators of safety and fairness in the criminal justice system and indicators of the underlying factors and conditions affecting progress towards a safer state. Presently, through its MFR, the agency only reports 1 crime outcome measure, which is the number of criminal organizations disrupted and dismantled through MSIN's support, as shown in Exhibit 13 on page 27. DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting GOCPP create additional outcome measures related to public safety or crime prevention for the fiscal 2028 submission of MFR data. The second and final issue begins on page 28. GOCPP's allowance includes $50.6 million in federal fund spending. A good portion of that comes from the Department of Justice's Office for Victims of Crime, through which GOCPP receives federal VOCA assistance and VOCA compensation funds. Assistance dollars support victim services providers. The compensation dollars support Maryland's Criminal Injuries Compensation Board program. As shown in Exhibit 14, the federal fiscal 25 VOCA assistance award is approximately $23.1 million. The $23.1 million amount is approximately $8.4 million lower than the 10-year average, but $8.9 million more than the federal fiscal 24 award. Due to the new award and there being additional funds available from past years, the agency has about $25 million in federal funds to use for the $60 million level of VOCA assistant grant program established by Chapters 625 and 626 of 2023. As federal funding continues to fluctuate and the grant program remains of great importance to the state, DLS recommends adding budget language restricting $100,000 pending the submission of an annual report on VOCA. Moving now to the federal compensation funds, they represent a smaller source of revenue to the state. However, it's easier to predict their funding level due to its formula, which is shown in Exhibit 15 on page 29. As discussed in last year's analysis, GOCPP failed to utilize the 2019 federal award, contributing to a lower certified payout in federal fiscal 2023 than in the previous year. Accordingly, the state only received a new award of $296,000 in federal fiscal 25. As shown in Exhibit 16 on page 30, the agency did spend other federal dollars available to it, so now the $296,000 is available to it, only that amount in state fiscal 26. Despite this, the governor's budget books show the working appropriation is including $3.3 million in federal funds, and to align the working appropriation with anticipated spending, DLS recommends that the fiscal 26 federal fund authorization be reduced by about $3 million. In addition to federal funds, CICB claims are paid with revenues from the judiciary, investment earnings, and restitution paid by a defendant to the fund for reimbursement of money already paid by the fund to a victim. Between these sources, there's approximately $3.3 million for GOCPP to use for claims in fiscal 26. Though only $2.7 million was awarded in fiscal 25, additional awards and higher award amounts may be paid in fiscal 26 due to Chapter 705. Finally, DLS recommends that $100,000 in general funds be withheld pending the agency's submission of the fiscal 26 annual CICB report, and that certain additional information also be included. Detail on all DLS recommended actions can be found on pages 32 through 35. An update appears on page 36, and appendices can be found on pages 37 through 45. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions from the committee at this time.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Miller. Any questions of the committee for the DLS analysts? All right, seeing none, at this time we will have Dorothy Lenig, the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy, and her team, if they can come up at this time. Welcome, and you can begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dorothy Lenig. I'm the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy, otherwise known as GOCAP. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the subcommittee today as you review the proposed operating budget for GOCAP.
Madam Executive Director, if you could pull the mic a little bit closer or just a little closer so we can capture everything you're saying. Appreciate it.
Are you saying I'm short?
Wonderful.
We really want to thank our DLS budget analyst, Madeline Miller, for her thoughtful and thorough analysis. I'd like to start by introducing the panel with me today. I have Sylvia Senkes, our CFO, and Quentin Jones, who's our Criminal Justice Grants Division Director. I'm grateful to our management team who are all committed to rebuilding GOCAP and serving as the coordinating office that advises the governor on criminal justice strategies. A significant part of GOCAP's work is making grant awards to law enforcement agencies, victim service organizations, and organizations serving justice-involved youth. We're committed to awarding these funds fairly, equitably, and in accordance with the governor's public safety priorities. We've provided answers to the DLS analysis, and we're happy to answer any questions.
All right. So we do have the benefit of your written response. Just off the, well, first, any questions of the subcommittee for Delegate Kaiser?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two very different questions. In the DLS report that we were given, it definitely showed that you have reduced the need for contractual employees, I guess, in the last couple years, but there are still a certain number and they tend to cost more than regular employees. So is there what is the effort on your part to reduce that need? Are there open, and then I missed it, and also it's in here, I guess, if there are any open positions. So I'm trying to understand about the reliance on contractual.
So 5 of our contractual employees are the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board, the board members.
Okay.
And they only work 1 day a week, so they're contractual. And I think we have 1 other contractual employee. Is that right?
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I had one more question, a very different question. As I understand it, in about half of the states, the domestic violence and sexual assault coalitions administer the funds that support the services that they work on. In Maryland, those coalitions certify the programs, but don't administer the funds. Would that be a best practice and something we should be doing in the state of Maryland? And would that save us money?
I don't know whether it would save us money. We would have to think.
I don't know. I'd have to analyze.
Okay, it'd be nice to see what you think other states are doing and how whether it could work here. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Delegate Kaiser. Vice Chair Ivy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for the work that you do. I do have two questions. First is more of just like a technical explanation. When individuals are being awarded funds, grants for victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, when these organizations are receiving grants, how much notice do they get? Like, is it a day before? Is it a month before?
So that was an issue over time, that the grants were getting out late. They were getting out, let's say it had a July 1st start date, they were getting out after that. In the more recent years, when I first started, I think we got only maybe 15% of them out before the start date. Last year, we got 49.9% out, so almost 50%. We started putting the NOFA, the Notice of Funding Availability, out much earlier, and so it's our goal to get almost all of them out on time, really all of them out on time. Whether I don't think we'll get there this year necessarily, but we really are driving towards that.
Wonderful. And thank you for the progress there. If we could continue in that direction, that'd be wonderful. I've got two more brief ones, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So the analysts, DLS recommended cutting $2.5 million, I believe, from, what's the acronym, GVRAS, Group Violence?
GVR, Group Violence Reduction Strategies.
Mm-hmm. So could you talk to me about what impact that might have on Prince George's County?
I think that money was focused on Baltimore City.
Right.
So I don't think it would impact Prince George's County. It was money, there had been ARPA money that had gone for GVRS, and that money's gone. And so I think this was to continue that, what many would argue has been a pretty successful crime-fighting strategy in Baltimore City.
Yeah, absolutely. And Baltimore City has made a lot of progress. I know the mayor has been focused on these other ways to lower crime. The VIP program as well has been fairly successful. Could you speak to that? And then, of course, I will ask you about how this impacts Prince George's. And I think I know the answer, unfortunately.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Jones on VIP.
When you mean successful, what do you mean by?
Okay, let me ask a different question. The VIP program has $3 million of funding for it this year. Last year is $3.7 million. How much of that went towards programs in Prince George's County?
I don't have that information in front of me, but I can get that to you.
Okay. All right. It's my understanding that 0 of those dollars went to Prince George's County and the GVRs as well. So I wanted to underscore this and highlight, crime doesn't always only happen in Baltimore. We do need resources in Prince George's County as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I can just say, Prince George's County does get a lot of GOCAP money. And, for people who haven't been on this subcommittee before, if you go onto our website, we have an interactive map. And you can click on any county, and it tells you every grant that each county gets, what it goes towards, what it says it does, who to call if you want to try to access it. So I know we've had a big focus on trying to get more money to Prince George's. VIP is pretty competitive, so I'm not sure who's applied and what they've applied for. It's also, they try to fund the same programs for a period of time, because one of the complaints has been that you get funded 1 year and then you don't get funded after that. So it's like a step down, but they do. So again, we'd have to look to see who's applied, who hasn't gotten funded.
Absolutely, and I've heard this issue many times before, and hopefully we can find ways to be more proactive about getting some of these dollars into different areas of the state as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Delegate. Madam Executive Director, coming back to my comments earlier, 2021, we passed, as I'm sure you're aware, the Maryland Police Accountability Act that creates police accountability boards. That was something that I was, adamant about. And I noticed in the GOCAP budget, there's no money allocated for police accountability boards. Am I wrong in that, or did I miss something?
You're talking about PACT?
Yeah.
Yes.
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 I believe that's sunsetted. I believe that's why that's no longer in there.
Okay. And so what support, I guess, through GOCAP's office is being provided, I guess, for localities that do have PABs as required by law to ensure that they're fulfilling their function that we set out in the Police Accountability Act, because, you know, they're going to need there is operational costs, right? So what is GoCop doing?
I would defer that to.
Yeah, so there are other grant programs that our office offers. One of the biggest ones is the Burn Jack program, which is a federal program that has a start date of 10/1. So that's a program that can be utilized for those agencies that was receiving PAC funds currently.
Gotcha. And by agencies, you mean the localities that have PABs, and are they aware those funds could be
Yes.
utilized?
Yes.
And is that information going to be dispersed or shared with localities so that they're aware?
Correct, yes. So that, the Burn Jack notification, NOFA, will be released hopefully in May or June, and then they will have 30 to 60 days to apply for that fund.
Gotcha.
That has an October 1 start date because it's federal.
An October 1 start date.
Yes.
All right, good. Any other questions from the subcommittee? All right, seeing none. Executive Director Leonard, appreciate your time. I will certainly follow up with you all on the PAB portion of this. Yeah, thanks so much to you and your team. Take care. The next agency we're going to have up is DPSCS Police and Correctional Trainings Commission. We will begin with our DLS analysts. Folks signed up to testify. Is there? Are there folks? Let me double check. 1 second before we move to the next agency. All right, so before we move to the next agency, thanks for flagging that, but we have some folks who signed up to testify on GoCop's budget. I'll call folks, and if you can just come up to the panel, but I have a Laura Ruth from the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence. I have a Laura Jessic from MCASA, a Quentin Jones, well, I think he was there. Okay, good. And I have a Christian Goebel. Did I? No. Wrong on the Christian Goebel. I think that's it.
This list is the same.
And anyone who's at a mic can begin.
Do you want me to? Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to us today. My name is Lori Ruth, and I am the Public Policy Director at the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence. We are the statewide coalition that represents our comprehensive domestic violence programs, affiliate programs, and other members. I just want to say we hear every day from our member programs about the challenges they face in responding to increased demand for services that went up dramatically during COVID and never decreased. The new norm of a higher number of clients with greater needs and with the increased cost of living and increased operating costs has put a tremendous strain on all of our programs' workforce. Of course, the current insecurity in federal funding streams adds an unbearable amount of pressure on our service providers. Now is not the time to cut state funding. In 2024, our domestic violence programs answered over 41,000 hotline calls and provided over 100,000 bed nights, shelter nights to families fleeing violence. The 2025 numbers are not out yet, so I'm using the 2024, but we are fairly assured that they'll be approximately the same. The budget for GoCap as proposed for domestic violence service providers specifically eliminates $1 million of what we call GDVC funds, General Domestic Violence Center funds, which means comprehensive domestic violence providers will lose 1/3 of the state funds that are earmarked specifically for domestic violence services. Notably, our core state funding, which is approximately $2 million, has not increased in over 2 decades. In 2 decades, we have not had an increase in funding. This $1 million that's no longer in the budget was originally $3 million in 2022 to try to bring us up to the amount of funding that our programs need. That $3 million was then cut to $1.5 million and then $1 million. Cutting it now completely would be devastating to our programs. Importantly, State money is free from severe restrictive requirements attached to any federal money, and that it fills holes in budgets to work around that issue. We are fervently asking this $1 million to be restored. Last year, we urged GOCAP to be as flexible as possible with how they administer the funds that are available, such as having no-cost extensions, removal of caps on administrative costs, and more simplified processes. GOCAP has made inroads on these things that you just discussed. They've improved in their timing of NOFOs, which we very much appreciate. Excuse me. And we hope they continue on that trend. I just can't express to you fully enough how this $1 million will make a difference to our comprehensive programs, and it's really vital. There's a long backstory to what happened last year. We did get that $1 million, but it was really by the good grace of GOCAP when everybody involved realized it hadn't been put in the budget. And it was originally, that $3 million was originally sort of at the core of Chair Barnes and Chair Gazzoni trying to help us. And so we are really asking this committee to take a look at that and help. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about this further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Laura Jessic, the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative and Sexual Assault Response Team Program Manager at the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault. I'm here today at the invitation of our director, Lisa Jordan. MCASA is the coalition of the rape crisis centers across the state of Maryland, and you'll hear from Lisa about the importance of rape crisis center funding. But today I'd like to inform you of continued delays and lack of prioritization in sexual assault evidence kit, rape kit, testing, and access to sexual assault forensic exams. While MCASA is grateful for the progress the legislature has made in recent years, substantial issues remain. Specifically, there continues to be delays in rape kit testing that affect investigations, survivor access to justice, and community safety. A second backlog of rape kits accruing at the state crime lab as they are unable to process state results and test results and enter DNA into the DNA database known as CODIS, further delaying investigations and justice. Restrictions on victim advocate access to the statewide SAKE tracking system, which limits oversight of SAKE testing progress. Delays in entering historical SAKEs into the tracking system have made it nearly impossible to determine the status of Maryland's rape kit backlog. While the entry deadline for these kits is approaching, there is no plan for notifying survivors and providing access to track their kits. In difficulty accessing time-sensitive sexual assault forensic exams, the programs that provide this care are known as SAFE programs, and they are already strained by outdated reimbursement regulations, and new restrictions on VOCA funds for forensic nurse examiners will further affect these programs and survivor access. While these issues should not diminish the progress that has been made in recent years, MCASA asks that you keep these matters in mind when reviewing the budget and making decisions that will directly impact survivors.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for this panel? Seeing none, I'll call. All right, we got that buzzer, cool. Delegate Kaiser.
Mr. Chairman, sorry I wasn't quick on the dime, but with a quick question for the lady from MCASA. In terms of the backlog of rape kits, I guess from somewhere in this testimony I saw the year 2019, but I know years ago that then Delegate Hebbleman had a bill about dealing with the backlog, and I thought, I got the impression then that we were going to be clearing it out, and it was going to be a multi-year effort, because like a question I asked earlier of the Treasurer's Office, you don't do things in 1 year and it takes time, but like, are we any better off than we were then? And shame on us if the answer is yes, or if the answer is no, but I'd like to hear a little more on that.
Yeah. Yes. Well, the Senator Hebbleman and the Sexual Assault Evidence Kit Policy and Funding Committee, chaired by the Office of the Attorney General, has done a lot of work with federal funds through the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. It's been nearly impossible to track the progress we've made, and partly because there's been consistent delays in uploading these kits into the tracking system. We can say with confidence, relative confidence, how many kits were tested with federal funds. And unfortunately, I can pull that number up here as of the most recent that I have, if you would give me a moment. But unfortunately, it's not nearly the progress I would have liked to have seen as part of MCASA. I would say We first applied in 2019. It's now 2026, and I could pull up that number in a moment, but probably about 2,000 of a 6,000 to 7,000 kit backlog with an incorrect inventory as well. There are agencies that did not provide accurate data or any data regarding their untested kits when we inventoried them, so.
All right, thank you very much. I'll call up the next group of witnesses. I have Stephanie Powers from the Care Healing Center, Lisa Jordan, also from the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault, Amanda Rodriguez from Turnaround Inc., Sarah Case Heron, Maryland Children's Alliance. And whosoever gets to the mic first can begin. And just as a reminder to folks, just 2 minutes for witness testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Powers, and I'm the Executive Director of the Care Healing Center, which is Carroll County's designated sexual assault and human trafficking agency. I come before you today to urge you to maintain the continued legislative allocation for Maryland's rape crisis centers. On December 23rd, our hotline rang at 6:42 a.m. A mother was calling, not sure what to do, because her 14-year-old daughter had just come home and disclosed that she was raped by a man she had met over social media. The mother was overwhelmed, angry, scared, and unsure of what to do next. Our hotline advocate validated the mother's feelings and talked through the options available. The advocate then was able to speak with the daughter, who was feeling fear, shame, and guilt about what had happened to her. Together, the three of them decided that the best option was for her to go to the hospital for a sexual assault forensic exam and report to the police. At the hospital, the mother and daughter were met by another advocate from our center and were provided emotional support during the exam and police interview. During the entire time, the child was offered grounding techniques, support, and clear information about what was happening and why. Since then, we've continued to provide counseling advocacy for both the daughter and mother, recognizing that sexual violence impacts the entire family, working through both the trauma and grief. We're helping this family rebuild safety and trust piece by piece. This is what your funding makes possible. Not just a response on the worst morning of their lives, but the long, steady work of healing that follows, ensuring that no survivor ever has to go through this alone. The need is certainly growing. As of January, we have already provided services to 178 survivors in Carroll County, already 77% of last year's total clients served. At a time when federal funding streams have been unpredictable and delayed, the legislative allocation has provided stability. It has allowed us to retain trained advocates, keep our hotline staffed, and respond immediately when survivors need us. Administration through MCASA ensures that these funds remain survivor-centered.
Please complete your testimony.
Right now, survivors are hearing messages that their words may not be enough. When they call us in the middle of the night, our response may continue to be, "We believe you and you are not alone." Maintaining this funding ensures that messages remain true across all of Maryland. On behalf of all the survivors we serve and those who are not brave enough yet to call, we thank you for your support.
All right, thank you. Next, please.
I'll go next. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chair Osvero and members of the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee. I am here today on behalf of Maryland Children's Alliance, the statutorily designated convener of our state's 24 child advocacy centers, to testify as favorable with amendments on the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy's fiscal year 2027 budget. The Maryland Children's Alliance respectfully requests a reallocation of $1 million in funding for child advocacy centers, up from the $300,000 currently proposed in the FY 2027 budget. Child advocacy centers serve child victims of physical and sexual abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. The funds budgeted for both the Maryland Children's Alliance and child advocacy centers, which are distributed as law enforcement grants from the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy, provide critical support to the response services for child victims. Child advocacy centers use these funds to support a multidisciplinary team response, including forensic interviews, medical services, investigation, and trauma-informed treatment. Over the past 10 years, Maryland Child Advocacy Centers have provided services to 54,137 children. More recently, in 2025, Maryland Child Advocacy Centers served 5,446 children. Even as demand for child advocacy center services increases, Maryland continues to lag significantly behind our neighbors in funding. Last year, Maryland funded child advocacy centers at $55 per child served, while our neighbors in Virginia invested $179, Pennsylvania invested $201, and West Virginia invested $536. Our request of $1 million would bring Maryland to $184 per child, still below the U.S. national average of $269 per child, but a meaningful step toward meeting the demand. According to a study by the University of Maryland in 2021, for every dollar spent on child advocacy center services, the state would save, my apologies.
No worries. You can finish up.
Thank you. $663 on other services. When the state supports its child advocacy centers, it is not only benefiting economically, but also ensuring and restoring the health and safety of its children. We respectfully request an increase in the annual state investment to child advocacy centers to $1 million. On behalf of Maryland's 24 local child advocacy centers, their network of multidisciplinary teams, and the children and families they serve, thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much for your advocacy on behalf of our kids. Next, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Acevero, Vice Chair Ivey, members of the committee. My name is Amanda Rodriguez. I'm the CEO of Turnaround. We are a domestic violence and sexual violence serving organization, the Rape Crisis Center for the greater Baltimore area. We serve Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and Howard County. I'm also an almost lifelong Prince George's County resident. Just to highlight the work that we do at Rape Crisis Centers and domestic violence service providers, just in the last month, we served a 21-year-old survivor. Her abuser was more than 20 years her senior. He held her captive for several days, continuously physically and sexually assaulting her over the time frame, knowing that she could not flee because of the weather. She was strangled several times and sodomized. During her captivity, she was threatened with weapons. We responded immediately, providing crisis response when she was seen at the hospital, offered shelter, therapy, and legal advocacy immediately upon her being well enough to be able to advocate or be able to go into those services. We create safe spaces in an unhinged world, places where survivors like this young woman can sit, breathe, stretch, grow, and begin again. We hold babies while their mothers attend trauma therapy. We provide hot meals when food stamps are taken away. And currently, we are providing grocery delivery to our immigrant community because they're afraid to come out of their homes to receive services. We answer calls in the middle of the night, like the one that I actually took. It was last weekend at midnight from a 16-year-old trafficking survivor who was standing out in the freezing cold with nowhere else to turn. This work is not abstract. It is human, it is urgent, and it matters. In the last fiscal year, Turnaround received an increase of 70% to our helpline. That's over 10,000 helpline calls total in the last year. We provided crisis shelter, legal advocacy support, and therapy to almost 2,000 survivors and their children. That's a 34% increase over the prior year. And we reached over 23,000 individuals through outreach and prevention services. Every statistic is a person that has experienced some of the most egregious acts committed against them and a family trying to rebuild their lives. We need your help to ensure that we can continue to provide the comprehensive care that our community should expect. We are so appreciative that GOCAP continued to level funding for regional navigators in VOCA this year in the budget, but we are asking that you restore rape crisis and domestic violence funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Lisa Jordan with the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault. Thank you for allowing us to testify today. You know, GOCAP controls a lot of the funding for rape crisis center survivors, rape crisis centers, child advocacy centers, and they're also one of our key partners in Maryland's efforts to support sexual assault forensic exams. I do want to acknowledge that they have made significant improvements and that they started in a very bad place at the agency. However, it is the end of the term, and it is time for them to continue to improve things and provide services that Marylanders should expect. MCASA is the State Sexual Assault Coalition, so we have members who are all of our rape crisis centers that you've heard from. We work with the child advocacy centers closely. We certify rape crisis centers. We advocate with state entities, and we help provide a statewide voice and perspective on various boards and committees. GOCAP's required by law, by state law, to work with us. You already heard from folks, demand is up, cases are more complex, $2 million has been cut from domestic violence and sexual assault. So that same $1 million that the network is asking for domestic violence programs, there's also $1 million that we've received in the past for rape crisis centers. It was a legislative allocation. It was hugely important. It was also administered by MCASA, and it was one of, unintentionally probably, it was one of the best responses you all made to the federal administration chaos, because we could provide flexibility that some of those other grants could not. So it was really, really important. Please do know that whatever your politics are, the federal government's actions in this area have really created problems in the field. Grants have been delayed, planning is very difficult. Just last week, the federal government asked the state health departments to rewrite grant proposals to meet the federal government's priorities. We're sure this is coming for the victim services grants as well. So everything you do at the state level, it truly makes a difference. You have our written testimony, you have testimony from many of the programs in your jurisdictions. We're happy to answer questions, but we urge you to at least continue the funding we had before. You know inflation, that's not flat funding, that's a decrease, but please at least do that.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the committee for this panel? Delegate Beecham. Yes.
I don't have a question, but I would like to thank you ladies for what you do. You know, it's, you know, when people need help, especially in that kind of condition, you know, it's just, you know, I'll do what I can to help. So thank you.
Vice Chair Ivey.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to echo the sentiment of Delegate Beecham. And an old friend of mine spent some time working at Turnaround, and so I know the significance of the work that you do. I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep, thank you. And thank you, Delegate Beecham. Also, just echoing your words, thank you all for the work that you all do. Certainly appreciated, and your testimony, you know, is certainly heard, and your advocacy is felt. So appreciate it. Thank you all so very much. And I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anyone who has signed up to testify on GOCOP's budget. Is there anyone here that has signed up to testify that did not hear their name? All right, wonderful. And so with that, we'll move on to the next agency, which is DPSCS Police and Correctional Trainings Commission. We will begin with our DLS analyst, Mr. Josh Weinstock, followed by the agency representatives, Secretary Carolyn J. Scruggs. Mr. Weinstock, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Josh Weinstock with the Department of Legislative Services. Today, I'll be presenting the budget for the Police and Correctional Training Commissions within DPSCS. The PCTC provides staffing and administrative services to two commissions, the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission, or MPTSC, and the Maryland Correctional Training Commission. The Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission sets minimum police selection and training standards for police officers, while the Maryland Correctional Training Commission sets them for parole, probation, juvenile justice, and correctional personnel. PCTC also staffs and operates the Public Education and Training Center in Sykesville. The fiscal 2027 budget totals $13.3 million, which is a decrease of $491,000 or 3.6%. Exhibit 1 on page 3 displays the fiscal 2027 allowance categorized by major spending area. 64% is dedicated to personnel costs for instructors and administration at approximately $8.6 million. An additional $2 million in special funds is included in the PCTC budget from the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission fund to provide resources that enhance law enforcement training and support commission activities. The fiscal 2027 allowance decreases by approximately $491,000 as shown in Exhibit 2 on page 4, which breaks down the itemized changes by expense type. The largest changes include a decrease of $640,000 in rent, $256,000 in turnover expectancy to increase the budgeted turnover to 7%, and an increase of $374,000 in employee and retiree health insurance premiums. Moving on to personnel on page 5, the fiscal 2027 allowance provides 77 regular positions, an increase of 1 position from the working appropriation in 26. Exhibit 3 on page 6 shows the fluctuation in monthly vacancies from a low of 3 vacancies in January 2024 to a high of 15 vacancies in December 2024. The most recent vacancy data shows 5 vacancies in December 2025. The observation I would like to highlight today is related to the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission Fund. This fund receives $2 million each year through special fund court fees. Historically, it has not been utilized at the rate that matches its growth, resulting in significant fund balance. Exhibit 4 on page 7 shows the police training fund revenues, expenditures, and estimated balance from fiscal 2019 to 2027. Before fiscal 2024, the agency used the fund for a few items, but was slow to expend resources. It spent less than $750,000 combined between fiscal 2019 to 2023, leaving a starting balance fund in fiscal 24 of $9.6 million. In response to consistent underutilization, the BRFA of 2024 expanded allowable uses in fiscal 2024 and 25 to include correctional training and equipment needs. In fiscal 2024, PCTC reported increased expenditures of $2.4 million. However, $2 million of that amount was due to a transfer of funds to support other PCTC functions. The BRFA of 2025 authorizes the governor to transfer up to $5 million from the fund to the general fund by the end of fiscal 2025. The starting balance in fiscal 26 was approximately $4.9 million. In fiscal 27, the projected starting balance is also $4.9 million. However, that assumes that spending in fiscal 26 will be $2 million, which exceeds recent actual spending. A few of the significant projects currently used by the MPTC fund include annual maintenance and licensing fees of about $500,000 a year for 5 years, starting in fiscal 24 for the Learning Management System Replacement Project. The new system tracks public safety professionals' certification throughout their careers and information on course and class history, student attendance, firearm qualifications, and other information. The Simulation Training Environment Project at the Public Education and Training Center in Sykesville will construct multiple small buildings to offer a realistic community setting for practical scenario-based training. The estimated construction cost is between $5 and $7 million. The state has awarded the design contract for the project for about $1 million, and construction is expected to take 2 years and begin later this year. The fund also supports general and operating expenses for the police and correctional training commissions, such as mandated training for members of the Administrative Charging Committee and trial boards. DPSES should provide the anticipated Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission Fund expenditures for each project in fiscal 2026 and 27. The department should also discuss projects that have been prioritized for fiscal 2027 and 2028. Given that the estimated MPTSC fund balance at the start of fiscal 2027 is approximately $5 million, the Department of Legislative Services recommends adding a provision to the BRFA of 2026 to authorize the transfer of $2 million of this balance to the general fund in fiscal 2026. DLS concurs with the governor's allowance. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Weinstock. Any questions for the DLS analysts? All right, seeing none, Secretary Scruggs, welcome to you and your team.
Good afternoon, Chair Acevedo, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Carolyn J. Scruggs. I am the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. I have with me Ms. Kate Gossett, the Executive Director of Public Safety and Education Training Center, and Mr. Wayne Silver, the Executive Director of the Police Training and Standards Commission. The department always appreciates our collaboration with DLS and Mr. Weinstock's thorough analysis. In the analysis, DLS asked us to respond to one issue and one recommended action. The department was asked to provide the anticipated MPTSC fund expenditures for each project in FY26 and FY27, as well as to discuss projects that have been prioritized for both of those years, including FY28. Since the beginning of FY26, the department has spent $500,000 from the fund on the behalf of the commission, covering the expenses of training, the Police Accountability Board, Administrative Charging Committee, and the Trial Board. The speaker series, which provides impactful speakers, discuss practices and establish effective leadership teams. Professional development for instructional staff and leaders to acquire new skills and to enhance their knowledge and improve their performance. Specialized equipment such as handheld radios for the Police Entry-Level Academy and firearm range simulators for police and correctional officers. And finally, physical agility and conditioning equipment for both police and correctional academies. The department anticipates an additional $700,000 of spending for the fund for the remainder of FY26. These primary expenditures include additional commission activities, speaker series, and professional development, LMS annual software licensing and maintenance costs, IT infrastructure upgrades for the main administration building and our classrooms, classroom upgrades and the library transformation into the Police and Correctional Commission meeting room, audio-visual room, and recording capabilities. For the FY27, the department has prioritized the continuation of funding expenditures for general commission upgrades, training, and activities. As a top priority for the department, $3 million are being placed in reserve for the construction phase of the scenario-based simulation training environment. $1.2 million has already been spent on the architecture and engineering design, which is scheduled for completion by the end of this calendar year. FY 2028, the department has prioritized the construction phase of that simulation training environment, the General Commission and associated board activities, funding for service and contractual obligations such as our learning management systems. And if you are not familiar with the simulated training environment, I will shout out Prince George's County, because if you have been there, you know how dynamic that is and how important it is to allow those real life scenarios to be part of your training there. So definitely a reason we want to definitely have it at the state level. DLS has recommended adding a provision to the 2026 BRFA authorizing the transfer of $2 million of the MPTSC fund to the general fund for FY26. The department respectfully disagrees with the transfer of the $2 million to the fund. It's important to note that the $5 million starting fund balance for fiscal year 2027 accounts for a multi-year contract. These contract obligations are significant. They are long-term capital construction projects, and their estimated costs are between $5 million and $7 million. These contractual obligations and long-term capital projects represent a large portion of the anticipated planned expenditures. The department budgets for both of these projects from the MPTSC fund to meet financial obligations over multi-years. Additionally, the Department of General Services requires total funding availability for the capital project for us to move forward. Thus, we are required to reserve the funds for future financial commitments. A funding reduction would have a devastating impact on the construction of the scenario-based simulation training environment, and it would not allow us to benefit law enforcement with this dynamic area for training. We strongly believe a scenario-based training environment is needed It's needed to address the challenges of public safety, to provide them real-life scenarios as to what is going on, and to ensure that we provide specialized training to all of our police and correctional officers. This project will also provide a high level of training environment where law enforcement and other public safety officials can bridge the gap between the classroom instruction and the real-world application. The project anticipated to be completed in the current fiscal year, and the projected project in fiscal year 27-28 represent the current future needs of law enforcement and correctional training. The department is happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Secretary Scruggs. Any questions of the subcommittee for Secretary Scruggs? All right, well, I'll take the Vice Chair Ivey.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate you all speaking to, thank you, Secretary Scruggs, for being here. The $2 million, could you just speak more about what that would mean for the work that you do? It was suggested and you were just speaking to it, but if you could elaborate a little bit more on that.
You want Kate? I'll let her start.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for the question. Again, my name is Kate. Sure. Again, my name is Kate Gossard. I'm the Executive Director of the Public Safety Education and Training Center. The Police Training and Standards Fund is specifically directed towards commission activities. One of their primary initiatives has been construction of the simulation training environment. So we rely on that fund, the non-lapsing fund, to grow, to allow us to accrue the funds needed to move forward with construction. At this point, if that $2 million is transferred to the general fund, we do not anticipate having enough balance to move forward with construction. So as it was stated previously, we've already invested the money with DGS. The architectural engineering firm is about halfway through their design phase. DGS is currently reviewing the schematic drawings. So with their approval, we anticipate moving forward with solicitation later in the year. But again, that is contingent on full fund availability for the construction phase. So without that $2 million, this project will be deferred.
And I think I would add that we want our law enforcement to be as highly trained as possible. And I mentioned to you, I'm sorry, am I not? Okay. We want our law enforcement to be as highly trained as possible. As I mentioned to you, Prince George's County has a very dynamic simulation area. There are other counties that do have them, but the Training Commission is the hub for the state, and it is the training for the Maryland State Police. So this will allow them, again, to get real-life scenarios right there on hand so that when they come back into the community, they can better serve the community. They can be more equipped as to how to respond and handle, because they will have gone through those scenarios in a real-life manner.
All right. Okay. Staying on the theme around training, what percentage of a participant's training is dedicated towards de-escalation versus other aspects of the job, such as firearm training or, you know, I don't know, like combat techniques? What version? I guess what percentage of that training is dedicated towards de-escalation versus everything else?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, sir. So I'll let Caitlin speak to the percentage, but I think as I shared with you briefly, I may have in a previous hearing, we started some time ago a de-escalation training that we learned about through National Institute of Corrections. And it is called Crisis De-Escalation, which we are doing alongside with PCTC. So that is already being done for staff, namely because of the acuity of our population in corrections, and we know also on the law enforcement side with mental health. So being able to recognize signs and de-escalate. Also making sure that we incorporate it as part of the modules that we do when we review our annual review as to what modules are going to be in the academy for every year. I don't have percentages with me. I don't know if Kate has that, but.
Right, I guess I'll be more specific. How many hours are required for them to dedicate to that training total?
Wayne may have it.
Sir, my name is Wayne Silver. I'm the Executive Director of the Police Training and Standards Commission. Police academies in Maryland, entry-level academies, have to be a minimum of 850 hours. There is no academy currently being run in the state, and there are 20 of them, that is less than 1,000 hours. Okay? De-escalation, as well as interacting with people in crisis, it's not easy to put a number on it because it's a program. It's the way we have coordinated our entry-level training objectives, because we just recently, 2 years ago, built them from the ground up, is from day one, police officers are learning de-escalation now. It's in everything they do. It's in patrol procedures. It's in communication. It's dealing with individuals in crisis. And it's also in defensive tactics and protective strategies, where they're taught that how to build discretionary time to give them more options and thereby more of an opportunity to de-escalate a situation. So it's not a set hour amount, but the entire program now is built on de-escalating a situation so that a higher level of force isn't necessary.
Got it. So some years back, I'd introduced and passed a bill called Anton's Law, which was motivated by the killing of an 18-year-old teen on the Eastern Shore, Anton Black. And what came to light from that situation was the fact that a law enforcement officer who was let go from Delaware was able to cross state lines, come to Maryland, and essentially be certified as a law enforcement official. I think that was a huge oversight on Police Trainings and Standards Commission. And since then, what have you all done to ensure that law enforcement officers who abuse their position and trust in other states aren't just moving over a couple of zip codes and being hired here in the state of Maryland?
Thank you for the question. Well, we've done a couple things. One is we now have, there's two forms that a department has to present to the commission if they want us to certify a police officer. The first one is an application for certification where they have to attest that they've met the certification standards and that they've done the checks that are required by the commission. What we've done since that, in response to it, is we've actually added perjury statements onto those documents. They didn't have them in the past. So now, if a law enforcement agency head, a chief, or a sheriff presents an AFC, they're doing it under penalty of perjury. What we've done in addition to that, Delegate, is we've also increased the amount of audits we do and the oversight that the commission does. We are very robust with our certification reviews, our audits reviews. Having assisted with that before I was the executive director, we are much more aggressive at looking at that type of stuff. We put a lot more resources to it. And what we've also seen in addition to that is we've increased revocation hearings as well, so that when we do identify a situation or an area of concern, we do a lot more of just validating the information that is given to us than perhaps was done in the past.
And is the background of a law enforcement or prospective law enforcement officer from where they've served in another jurisdiction, do you all request information? Do you all get background information on that? Because it appeared to me either we didn't get information from Delaware State Police or we didn't seek it. And even if we were provided with it, it didn't seem like there was any proper follow-up, et cetera. So what exactly do you all do in terms of like the process in getting information about these law enforcement officials?
So currently what we do is, written into the Public Safety Act now, is a requirement that a law enforcement agency, before they submit an application for certification to us, that they will go and physically look at those files. Okay, and that's part of the perjury. In the past, what agencies were doing, Delegate, is they would go to the last department they were at, assuming that, well, if they made it there, they're okay. Now they have to look at all the departments. In addition to that, we also, when we receive an application for certification, we also check the National Decertification Index to ensure that the individual is not named in it. And if we do have questions or something just doesn't seem appropriate, I certainly reach out to my counterparts in other states and get the information from them as well. Occasionally, it doesn't happen, all the time, but if we have what's considered to be an anomaly, we will hold up the certification until all all the questions are answered that the commission may have. And if in fact we can't get those answers, we will defer them to the full commission for a decision.
Got it. Good to know. And just last question, and I'll turn it to committee for questions again, but totally forgot what I was going to ask. Delegate Kaiser, I'll come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Something that you just said was fascinating to me when you mentioned, and I think we both reacted to it, this mention of the National Decertification Index. How long has that existed?
It's run by the International Association of Directors of Law Enforcement Standards of Training, which I'm a member of. And it's been in existence for at least 10 years. There is a requirement in Maryland public law that we will enter data into it as well. So anytime we hold a revocation hearing or we refuse a recertification of a former police officer, that information, that data is entered into the decertification index. Now, the information that's entered into that, the same as any other states, it's enough to have questions asked. For example, we don't put a lot of details in it, but if the individual leaves Maryland and tries to get a job in Utah, the Utah Post director of our equivalent will reach out to us and say, why did you put them in? And then we'll coordinate providing the information that way.
All right, well, thank you. I think that answers both of our questions. So not only thank you for the question, but thank you for probably being a part of making that happen, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks so much. And then two last quick questions. The first is coming back to curriculum. What, if any, training, instruction is provided for dealing with Marylanders, individuals with non-visible disabilities, those who may be on the autism spectrum, et cetera, law enforcement train in that regard, and how many hours? Who are the folks that are providing that instruction? Is it something that's in tandem with like behavioral specialists, or is it just something that you as, and credit to your background in law enforcement, but you're not a behavior specialist? What sort of a cooperation is there on like training of that nature?
So our training, there are over 700 objectives that police officers have to be taught, tested, and mastered. And they're broken into 16 topical areas. One of the topical areas is that, dealing with individuals in crisis. Now, the law enforcement academies, and there's also obviously a reoccurring requirement to train them as well every 3 years. We work with special interest groups. We work with county health professionals. On our commission, we have a mental health expert who assists us with this. So we certainly don't do it in a vacuum. In addition to that, one of the things our commission just did is we just streamlined the curriculum for crisis intervention training throughout the state, so that it has to be a minimum of 40 hours and meet certain curricular milestones, or we will not accept it for certification. So we certainly don't do it in a vacuum. We work with any group that has an interest, usually public health or some of the special interest groups.
Gotcha. And you'd mentioned that you have a very extensive background in law enforcement. How many years total?
30 years as a law enforcement officer, and I've been the executive director for, oh my goodness, going on 5 now.
All right, congratulations. I guess I have a question for the panel here. Are you all familiar with the FBI intelligence assessment titled White Supremacist Infiltration of Law Enforcement? It was published in 2006, about 2 decades ago.
Yes, I am. Very familiar with it.
Have you read that report?
I haven't read it recently, but I did read it when it first came out.
So I'll give you a little refresher. Not only does the FBI, not me, but the FBI say that white supremacist infiltration of law enforcement in the U.S. is real. It is a problem. No state is exempt, and that includes Maryland. And that it also poses a greater threat to African American, Latino, Asian American and Pacific Islander, Jewish communities, Muslim, immigrant, etc. So this report came to light thanks to Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin, because apparently this was not meant for public viewing. But my question to you all, to this panel is, what are you all doing in your roles to essentially root out white supremacist infiltration and those who belong to white supremacist organizations and are trying to be law enforcement officers in our state?
So Delegate, there's a couple things. First of all, we have a COMAR regulation, 120401.05, which says that in order for us to certify an individual to be a police officer, they must exhibit and demonstrate the behavior necessary to enforce the laws in the state of Maryland. My commission has made a determination that an individual who either participates or associates with those type of extremist organizations or associations is ineligible to be certified as a police officer in Maryland. Now, obviously, if a department wasn't to tell us about this, if they found this in their background, well, then that's where that perjury statement I alluded to earlier would come into play. But if my commission is identified, and we can get the information from anywhere, if we identify that an individual is associated with one of those groups, we would initiate revocation hearings immediately on that individual.
And I do know that the FBI maintains white supremacists, and well, a list of white supremacist organizations. They put it under domestic terrorism. Do you all cross-reference that in terms of, like, checking to see whether potential applicants are members of any of these organizations as listed by the FBI as white supremacists and extreme?
The commission, my commission doesn't directly, because we don't, the way the process works, we don't actually receive the background information about the individual. The department who wants to hire the individual is responsible for doing the background investigation, and they attest to us that they've completed it. And I believe it's very similar on the correction side as well. Now, where we would identify it is when we send those auditors out. If they were to look into the background, because they have to hold on to the background investigation paperwork for as long as the person is certified as a police officer. So if we were to identify that type of association in that situation, then we would take it up and we would move to initiate revocation proceedings. So we don't actually hold the data ourselves at the commission. We actually have to go out and get it from the agencies.
And so the local law enforcement agency is responsible for background, and they're the first point of contact. They're the folks who are responsible for that.
Yes, sir.
What if they get it wrong and that isn't an extensive background check? What safeguards are in place to ensure that someone who's a member of white supremacist group doesn't become deputized?
Well, a lot of it would come back to the way the commission works is we're the clearinghouse for the AFCs. So it may come from a complaint, which we get. It may come from someone within that organization notifying the commission. If the commission is or it could come from an audit. But if we were made aware or we identified ourselves that this happened, then that's when we would move. But unfortunately, because we're not the central hub for the information directly, in some cases, we're only as good as the information that's provided. That's why after the Anton Black situation, we ended up moving towards those perjury statements to ensure that we had something we could rely on if people are not accurate with the information they give us.
Gotcha. And so if a local law enforcement agency were to provide a background check on a law enforcement officer that's inaccurate, there's a way for you all to verify, and there is potential perjury charges that can be brought?
Absolutely.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
And so last question, just want to make sure any other questions from the committee? All right. Last question is what ongoing efforts are taking place so that those who sit on the PTSC or those that go through your academy are aware of, whether it's white supremacist organizations, how to spot those things? Because in this FBI assessment that we're talking about, they not just speak about the dangers of the communities that I just mentioned, but the dangers to public safety in terms of intelligence, in terms of the people that they secure. I mean, there's a lot of implications here, not just for the communities that you would suspect. And so I guess what other safeguards are you all putting in place to ensure that those who are coming into this academy that you all are saying you want to build, right? You all need funds to complete that, right? I want to ensure that, yes, there's brick and mortar, there's that academy, that training center, but the people that are coming through it aren't leaving out with a badge and a gun and still being a member of a white supremacist organization. So what other training is provided for those coming in? Is this something that you all make clear? Maryland's a very diverse state, right? Is this something that you all are making clear to participants in terms of their affiliation with white supremacist organizations?
So we actually do it in a couple ways. I mentioned earlier that there are 16 topical areas. One of those topical areas deals directly with terrorism, both foreign and domestic. Now, what we've done in that block, when we built down our entry-level objectives to the foundation, we took the emphasis off of more holistic view of terrorism to training police officers to identify signs and symptoms and behaviors so that they would have a better understanding of what they really need so that they can see, hey, this is a situation where there might be a white supremacist organization or an extremist organization there. And that is among the objectives that have to be taught and tested, and I'd be happy to provide them to you.
Yeah, I'd appreciate some follow-up on this. I have put in a bill on this topic for many years, but I remember when I first came across this report that Congressman Jamie Raskin released, the unredacted, I might add, because there's a redacted version and then there's the unredacted version. The unredacted version is uglier than the redacted version. But when I saw it, not only was I, disturbed by what I was reading, but just concerned about whether it is we're doing enough to vet and ensure that we're rooting out. And who knows, there might be some current law enforcement officers who are members of these organizations, and it begs the question, outside of the front-end training and intake, what are you all doing to make sure those who have been in law enforcement for 20+ years and are member of those organizations are people that you all are keeping an eye on? So there's a lot of questions that are coming up, and I would certainly like to work with you all to ensure that we don't have people who, don a police uniform 9 to 5 and then a white cloak from 5 to whenever, right? And so if we can just get a little bit more of serious attention to this issue. This is not my report. This was done by the FBI over 20 years ago. And I think it would be concerning for anyone in public safety to not be aware of this, but to not want to do something about it urgently. So I look forward to working with you all on that. All right. Any other questions from the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you, Secretary Scruggs and your team, but I think you're staying because we have one more, right?
Yes, sir.
So thank you both. Next is the DPSCS Community Supervision. We will begin with the DLS analyst, Josh Weinstock, followed again by Secretary Scruggs. Mr. Weinstock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Today, I'll be presenting the fiscal 2027 budget for DPSCS Community Supervision. The budget totals $145 million, which is a $3.3 million increase, or 2% from the fiscal 2026 working appropriation. This unit includes the Maryland Parole Commission, which makes decisions on parole for locally and state-sentenced individuals, and the Division of Parole and Probation, which provides criminal supervision and operates the Drinking Driver Monitor program. Exhibit 1 on page 3 shows an overview of the major spending areas. Personnel expenses for the nearly 1,200 regular positions in community supervision total $130 million, or 90% of the allowance. The vast majority of authorized positions being parole and probation agents or drinker driver monitors. The breakdown of the proposed budget changes are shown in Exhibit 2 on page 4. Personnel costs increased by $3.7 million, mainly due to retiree health insurance premiums. There are also increases of $629,000 for security equipment, which will be discussed later in issue 1. There are also decreases of $3.6 million in salary adjustments and $362,000 in contractual security services. Moving on to personnel on page 5, there is a decrease of 3 regular positions and 11 contractual full-time equivalents in fiscal 2027. Vacancy reports indicate that community supervision has 92 vacancies as of December 2025, which is 10 vacancies below budgeted turnover. The first observation I would like to highlight is the Division of Parole and Probation's safety efforts in response to the tragic murder of parole agent Davis Martinez on May 31st, 2024. Following Agent Martinez's murder, DPSCS suspended home visits. Agents maintained contact with offenders through in-person office visits and video calls. In-person home visits did not resume until staff were equipped with upgraded security equipment and had completed training. The original restart date of home visits was June 1st, 2025, but was delayed. Field work would eventually resume on August 4th, 2025. DPP required home visits to be completed with at least 2 staff members or with law enforcement. Field staff who have resumed work in the field were equipped with ballistic vests, law enforcement grade pepper spray, and Bluetooth low energy tracking tags. The department indicated that by October 14th, 2025, home visits would fully resume for all cases, including moderate and low moderate risk cases. The department acquired several pieces of protective equipment for its agents. As of January 2025, it had equipped 639 of its agents with multi-threat ballistic vests. Agents were also given 3-ounce law enforcement grade pepper spray. The type of pepper spray agents had previously used was for civilian use. In August 2025, the department began equipping its agents with iPhone 15 devices that would allow emergency text messages and location data to be sent to first responders when Wi-Fi or cellular services are not available. They are also using a new platform that is installed on agents' state-issued cell phones that tracks employee movements. And finally, agents were given Bluetooth low-energy tags that allow agents to trigger distress alerts from their cell phones without physically handling their phones. All field-eligible staff are required to complete training that includes defensive tactics, situational awareness, and training related to the new pepper spray and tracking devices. As of October 15th, 2025, the department reported 498 staff members had completed the required training and are cleared to return to field work. At the time, 255 staff members still needed to complete their training. Language in the fiscal 2026 budget book withheld $150,000 in general funds until DPSCS submitted a report on safety efforts for community supervision agents, which was submitted on October 15th, 2025. DLS determined the report to be in compliance with the language and recommends the release of the general funds. The fiscal 2026 budget includes about $430,000 for the purchase of body-worn cameras for community supervision agents. The department indicated that a 1-year purchase order on October 15th, 2025 was awarded for the body-worn cameras. Regulations regarding the training, issuance, and use of body-worn cameras were issued by the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission and went into effect on January 5th of this year. A program to pilot the use of body-worn cameras was set to begin January 1st of this year, but was delayed as DPP continues to finalize its body-worn camera policy. The department and the labor union were set to begin negotiations on the structure and scope of body-worn camera policies last month. Language in fiscal 2026 withheld $150,000 in general funds until DPSCS submitted a report on the costs, policies, and training related to body-worn cameras for community supervision agents, which was submitted on January 1st, 2026. DLS determined the report to be in compliance with the language and recommends release of the general funds. DLS will process a letter to this effect if no objections are raised by the committees. DLS also recommends adopting committee narrative requesting a report on October 1st, 2026 on DPP's efforts to improve the safety of community supervision agents and progress on the implementation of body-worn cameras for parole and probation agents. The second observation I would like to discuss begins on page 8 regarding community supervision agent caseloads. Exhibit 3 on the next page shows the number of cases supervised in each category. The total number of cases supervised for fiscal 2025 was 86,714, an increase of 1.6%, or about 1,400 cases. The increase is largely driven by the rise of probation cases. The American Probation and Parole Association, APPA, provides guidelines for caseloads depending on risk levels of clients. DLS calculated the recommended caseload ratio for Maryland's community supervision agents is about 59 cases per agent using those APPA metrics. Exhibit 4 on page 10 shows the average cases per agent by region compared to this calculation. All regions saw a decline in cases per agent in fiscal 2025, mainly driven by an increase in the number of agents. The capital region was the only region not to meet the recommended ratio. DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting that the annual report on DPP caseloads for parole and probation agents be submitted by September 15th, 2026. The last observation I will discuss begins on page 11 and relates to the delays in DPP's new risk assessment tool. DPP is required by statute to utilize an evidence-based risk needs assessment tool to assess and classify individuals brought under its supervision. In the past, 2 tools have been used, the Initial Risk Screener, IRS, and the Level of Service Inventory Revised, LSIR. Between fiscal 2021 and 2024, DPSCS contracted independent studies into whether its risk assessment tools were effectively predicting recidivism and whether they needed to be replaced or updated. Contractors found that the LSIR tool should no longer be used as a risk assessment tool, but rather as a case planning tool. They found the IRS tool to be an effective predictor of recidivism and that it should act as the primary tool for DPP while the department selects a new tool. Since the contractor's recommendations in January 2024, there have been a number of delays in identifying the new tool. The department has said that it is in the process of procuring a new risk assessment tool and said it was anticipating an award in fall 2025 and that it would be ready to begin validation testing by the first quarter of fiscal 2027. The department should comment on whether the risk assessment tool contract was awarded and give an update on the status of its implementation. DLS also recommends adopting committee narrative requesting that the annual report on the implementation of the new DPP risk assessment tool be submitted on September 1st, 2026. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Weinstock. Entertain any questions from the subcommittee for our DLS analysts. Seeing none, Secretary Scruggs, take it away.
Good afternoon again, Chair Acevedo, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Carolyn J. Scruggs, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, and with me is Ms. Toyin Bakari, the Acting Deputy Secretary of Administration. Again, thank you, Mr. Weinstein, for your thorough report. As always, I'd like to recognize and thank our DBM analyst, Christina Hoyer-Tuyon, for her advice and guidance during this process. In the analysis, DLS asked us to respond to 1 issue and 3 recommended actions. The department was asked to comment on the status of the risk assessment tool contract award and update the status of the implementation. The risk assessment tool contract is currently in the pre-award phase under legal review as contract terms and required documentation are finalized. Once completed, the final contract documents will be submitted to the vendor for review and signature, and the DGS Office of State Procurement will conduct a final review and bring the contract award before the Board of Public Works. Implementation can begin once the notice to proceed is issued to the vendor. The implementation phase will require additional time for data gathering, configuration, and rollout activities before the tool can be fully deployed. Selecting a new assessment tool is a major long-term commitment, and DPP has identified the need to develop a customized risk and needs assessment tool designed specifically for those individuals supervised here in Maryland. A customized tool aligns with the risk assessment revalidation study, which recommended that DPP consider commissioning research into the development and the customization of a risk assessment tool that would better identify individuals who pose an elevated risk of recidivism and of crimes of violence. These enhancements are consistent with risk need responsibility model, the national gold standard for evidence-based community corrections. DPP has been making preparations for the implementation of the new risk assessment tool by incorporating training in case management and risk needs responsiveness. Additionally, the EPICS 2 trainer certification to establish a train the trainer model for evidence-based skills was completed with 10 certified trainers. The training program equips parole and probation agents with a specific set of evidence-based skills to use during their routine client interactions. Then these are the interactions beyond the initial screening. This includes a variety of interactions centered on building relationships, behavioral analysis, and emphasis on problem solving. EPICS 2 in-service and academy training was deployed in January of 2026 for all DPP agents, supervisors, and drinking driving monitors. Given the need for a customized tool and the complexities involved in the implementation, the department is moving as fast as possible to secure the appropriate vendor, and we are eager to implement. DLS has also recommended DPSCS provide 3 reports on agency safety efforts, caseloads, and risk assessment tool implementation. And the department agrees with these recommendations, and we are here to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Secretary Scruggs. Any questions of the subcommittee for Secretary Scruggs? You did a great job, apparently. No questions.
We got there, thank you.
So seeing no questions, this ends today's hearing on DPSCS. It's Community Supervision Division. Thank you, Secretary Scruggs, and to your staff for being here. We have 3 witnesses that have signed up to testify on DPSCS Community Supervision's budget. I have a Christian Goebel from AFSCME Maryland Council 3, a Renika Robinson, AFSCME Local 3661, and John Preston, AFSCME Local 3661. Whosoever is at the mic first can begin, and just as a reminder, 2 minutes for witnesses. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Acevero, Vice Chair Ivey, and members of the committee. My name is John Preston, and I'm a parole and probation agent with the state of Maryland and a proud member of AFSCME Local 3661. I began my career a little over 7 years ago, and I'm here today because the employees of the Division of Parole and Probation often feel forgotten and neglected, and we need your help and oversight. Over the last several years, we have dealt with understaffing, high caseloads, high turnover, and the tragic murder of our colleague, Davis Martinez. I wanted to share what these challenges look like in my work region on the Eastern Shore. Several offices currently do not have enough administrative support or any administrative support staff to perform crucial functions, which causes agents to be pulled from their duties to perform administrative work. Drunk driving monitors also face challenges with understaffing and high caseloads, coupled with a broad geographic area to cover for their work. While enduring all these stresses, we struggle to make ends meet with our current pay. At the same time, the cost of living continues to rise. Many employees are working second and in some cases third jobs in order to get by. This contributes to burnout and high turnover. Additionally, veteran employees are concerned with wage compression. For example, I work in an office where I'm one step behind a colleague who is 1 year from retirement, and there are new hires who have started that are a step or 2 behind me. This wage compression has created an environment where the tenured employees do not feel valued and leave the agency. Separately, we have approximately 100 employees who took advantage of the recent retention bonus that was offered for employees who are eligible to retire. If those agents leave as expected this August when the final payout comes, we are looking at a drastic drop of employees to equal close to 15 to 20% of agents. I am respectfully requesting members of this committee support wage increases for state employees in the budget in order to retain our tenured staff, recruit new staff, and mitigate any impact to public safety. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Renika Robinson, and I'm a parole and probation agent within the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. I am also the proud president of AFSCME Local 3661. Our local represents employees working in community corrections. Today, I want to speak briefly about caseloads and why they matter. Right now, caseloads are not equally distributed. Some agents are carrying more cases than others, and those excessive caseloads create real safety risks for the public, the people we serve, and the staff doing this work. Caseloads directly affect how safely and effectively we can do our jobs. That is why caseloads are a mandatory subject of bargaining in our contract. Last year, our union won a grievance to reestablish the Caseload Study Subcommittee. After that victory, we learned that management had developed caseload thresholds without negotiating with the frontline workers most affected. We are concerned about the standards being used. The American Parole and Probation Association recommends no more than 20 intensive cases per agent. The department's proposed threshold is 40. We have not received a clear explanation for why Maryland is setting a standard that is double the national recommendation, and we are concerned about the impact this will have on officer safety and the quality of supervision. Reasonable case loads are not just a safety issue, they are a staffing issue. High caseloads drive burnout, increase vacancies, and push experienced staff out the door. Vacancies then raise caseloads even higher for those who remain. We cannot fix caseloads without fixing staffing, and we cannot fix staffing without competitive pay. If we want to recruit and retain qualified professionals and keep our community safe, we must invest in the workforce that does this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Acevero, Vice Chair Ivey, members of the committee. My name is Christian Goebel. I serve as Legislative and Political Coordinator with AFSCME Maryland Council 3. As you've heard today from President Robinson and Agent Preston, many members of AFSCME who work in community supervision continue to experience challenges with understaffing, high caseloads, and stressful work environments that place their safety at risk. More work must be done by the department to address these issues, as outlined by the report from the American Correctional Association that examined conditions within the department. Following the aftermath of Agent Davis Martinez's death, the American Correctional Association conducted an investigation and independent review to examine the circumstances surrounding the death of Agent Martinez. Additionally, they worked to identify possible operational gaps and offer recommendations with the intent of improving the safety of staff, enhance communication, and increase agency performance and effectiveness. The review was conducted between July and August of 2025 and included review of relevant materials such as policies, training manuals, budget documents, and incident reports. Additionally, ACA representatives conducted site visits to various DPP field offices, interviews with staff, DPSCS leadership, AFSCME representatives, and an anonymous survey was distributed to all DPP staff. I would like to highlight some key results from that survey to all DPP staff that really corroborates the testimony you've heard today from our members. Nearly 65% of respondents stated staffing levels were not sufficient to ensure safe and effective fieldwork operations, while 21% were unsure. More than 2/3 of staff rated their morale in the field office in which they work as low or very low. 82% of survey respondents described the rollout of new internal agency initiatives and operational changes as unclear or disorganized. 85% of staff reported technical and equipment issues were resolved in a timely manner, only sometimes, rarely, or never. Ultimately, these issues are systemic issues that have persisted, and we would appreciate the committee's oversight on these issues moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions to this panel of witnesses? Seeing none, thank you all very much for what you do. It is certainly appreciated. Thank you to the union, your union representative, for being here and bringing this to our attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we have anyone else signed up to testify on this budget, so we'll move to the next agency, the State Board of Elections. We will begin with our DLS analyst, Ms. Natalie Andrade, and then followed by the agency representative, Mr. Jared Demarinis, the state administrator for the Board of Elections.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon.
I am Natalie Andrade, and I'm here with the Department of Legislative Services to present the fiscal 27 allowance for the State Board of Elections. As you can see on page 1, the fiscal 27 allowance totals $69.7 million. This is an increase of $12.3 million, or 21.5% compared to the fiscal 26 working appropriation. Turning to page 3 of the analysis, the fiscal 27 allowance includes 2 proposed fiscal 26 deficiencies totaling $1.6 million in general funds. The first deficiency of $595,000 supports warehouse lease reimbursement for several local boards of elections that have relocated due to inadequate facilities. SBE reimburses 50% of lease costs when a county uses leased space rather than a county-owned facility. So the agency should provide the allocation of this deficiency by LBE and the factors specific to each jurisdiction's space needs. The second deficiency of $1 million addresses higher than anticipated vendor costs for the new campaign reporting information system. After vendor selection, the contract was approved at $6.5 million, exceeding the original estimate. In this case, general funds are provided directly to the SBE rather than flowing through DOIT as reimbursable funds. So SBE should comment on how it will coordinate with DOIT and ensure that DOIT maintains oversight as the NCREASE project progresses. On page 5 of the analysis, Exhibit 1 provides a breakdown of the fiscal 27 allowance. Election operations totals $29.9 million, or 43% of the budget. Equipment totals $20.3 million, or 29%, largely reflecting voting system investments. Personnel totals $9 million. The remaining funding supports major IT initiatives, fixed charges, communications, travel, supplies, and administrative functions. On pages 6 and 7, Exhibit 2 outlines the key changes in the budget. The $12.3 million increase is primarily driven by $17.7 million in major IT project implementation costs for local boards, including the new voting system, poll books, and the BRIM projects. There are also increases for cybersecurity and election operation support systems. These increases are partially offset by reductions in MDCREASE, IT project management services, leases, and election staffing costs. Personnel expenses increased by approximately $1.2 million, reflecting salary adjustments, fringe benefits, and 2 new positions. Finally, the agency should explain the reason for the $305,000 reduction associated with the removal of DOIT oversight costs for major IT projects from LBEs. Beginning on page 9, the issues section discusses implementation of 4 major information technology development projects. Exhibit 3 shows that the fiscal 27 allowance funding across SBE and DOIT totals $40.5 million for the statewide poll book modernization project, the new voting system, the new campaign reporting information system, and the voter registration and election administration modernization project. These projects represent multi-year investments that will directly affect administration of the 26 and 28 election cycles. On page 10, there is a discussion of the statewide poll book modernization project that will replace Maryland's aging electronic poll books. The total estimated cost is between $30 and $40 million, and the contract was approved in December 2025. The new poll books will not be ready for the 2026 elections, and full implementation is targeted for the 2028 presidential elections. The new voting system project replaces the state's current leased voting system, and the total estimated cost ranges from $100 to $125 million. The fiscal 27 allowance includes $13.9 million in special funds with matching general fund share in DOIT. The current lease expires in March 2027 with an option to extend to March 2029. The new system will not be ready for the fiscal 26 elections, and full implementation is targeted for 2028. Regarding this, the agency should comment on its level of confidence that the current implementation timelines for the SPM and the MVS IT project ensure full readiness for the 2028 presidential election, and whether additional operational, financial, or staffing contingencies may be necessary if delays occur in vendor performance, testing, or federal certification. On page 11, the new campaign reporting information system, NCRIS, went live in December 2025. This system supports campaign finance reporting, committee registrations, audits, and statutory disclosure requirements. The total estimated cost is up to $10 million. And after launch, SBE identified data conversion issues that affected reporting accuracy. The agency reported that these issues are being addressed through reconciliation and monitoring, and that the project has transitioned into operations and maintenance. The BRIM project will replace the MD voter system, which has been in use since 2006. Total estimated cost ranges from $30 to $40 million. The project is in the requirements phase, with a request for proposals anticipated in August 2026. Beginning on page 12, Issue 2 discusses implementation of 2025 legislation ahead of the 2026 election cycle. Chapters 277 and 278 established a language assistance program to identify counties with significant need for voter language assistance. 5 jurisdictions were identified for the 2026 election cycle. These are Anne Arundel County, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Montgomery County, and Prince George's County. Affected local boards have been notified and are coordinating with SBE on implementation. Chapters 320 and 321 require SBE to conduct risk-limiting audits following each statewide election. SBE has approved regulatory amendments to implement these audits, and standard operating procedures are nearing completion. Finally, Chapter 281 requires local boards to submit election plans at least 7 months before statewide primaries. As of the reporting date, 19 of the 24 local boards have received approval, with the remaining plans pending consideration. To conclude, on page 15, the Department of Legislative Services recommends adopting committee narrative, requesting quarterly reports on all major information technology development project activities and expenditures. And with that, I conclude my presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for the DLS analysts? Seeing none, welcome Mr. Administrator Jared Demarinis. And to his team, you can begin when you're ready.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. With me here, so Jared Demarinis, State Administrator of Elections. With me is Katie Berry, Deputy Administrator, and Shelley Holland, Director of Budget and Management for me here as well. So I've submitted my written testimony. You guys been here a long time. I won't have to go through this, but we are implementing, I just wanted to make note to Delegate Kaiser, we are implementing risk-limiting audits for the first time for the 2026 election, and have started to look at regulations and making sure that all the local boards are working on that as now. One of the bigger things is that they wanted me to comment on was, I want to address the biggest one here, which is the multiple projects one first. That is something that we have to do. Now, the poll book one was supposed to have been done prior to the 2026 election. We had an issue with the vendor for non-compliance. We had to cancel that contract. It was one of the first things that I did as state administrator, because we weren't going to chase money after a bad product. So we canceled it. We went out to bid, and now we have a new vendor in place for that project. It did delay us by about 2 years. So instead of having new poll books for the 2026 election, we're now having new poll books for the 2028 election. Simultaneously, we are still moving. We had to move forward with a new voting system. The new voting system has now been bought, and RFP is out, and now we're making sure we're doing gap analysis on that front there and getting that ready for the 2028 election as well. So, and then finally is the voting registration system. And as you can imagine with redistricting and the current debate there, we have a system that is 20 years old, that does not have the capabilities of modern systems. The idea that we would take, say, your data for redistricting and just upload it into the system is not possible with a 20-year-old system. It has to be manually entered in. This project here is of vital importance for us as an agency. These three projects are going on simultaneously. They involve a lot of the same personnel, but we have to get them done because otherwise it is critical for I would say, the future of Maryland elections to make sure that they're all successful. The two are already in a good stage, and now we were delayed a little bit with the voter registration from cuts from last year, but we're making sure that we're moving forward with it on an aggressive timeline. So as an agency, we're prepared to handle this, and we're mitigating all our internal processes and personnel on that front. We have a staffing contract to assist us on that as well, to help supplement any of our deficiencies in personnel. But it is vitally important. We cannot go into another redistricting effort with a system from 2006. It's safe and secure now. It does its job, but the flexibility and as you make changes with legislation, it is just, think about it, it's like your first iPhone, doing with a modern apps on it like that, right? It just can't handle it. And that's what we're basically doing. It can answer a phone call, it can do its functions, if you wanted to keep it at that level there. But as you make changes, it just cannot handle it. And we're at a critical juncture, and it has to be done. So we're well aware of that and want to move forward with it. The other part too, which is about the MD Chris system here and do its oversight. We have successfully modernized that system. That system was from 2012. You've now all filed a campaign finance report with it. It has gone live. It actually went live before that for the business disclosure portion of it in November. We had an extremely aggressive timeline from when the old contract ended in April of April of 25 to get it a fully functional, transferred over millions of records into the new database by November, and to go live with it for candidacy and campaign finances, for Title 13 filers such as yourselves by December, and for getting ready for the annual report. This was an aggressive timeline. We met all our challenges, and we've been making sure of that. It is now in the operations and maintenance phase, which do it oversight is just historically not on that front there. So that's why it was no longer needed on that.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
We do have the benefit of your testimony.
So sure, I understand you guys are late.
You're no stranger to this subcommittee.
Yeah, so I guess those were kind of like the bigger things there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, thank you, Administrator Demarinis. Delegate Kaiser.
I already said I had to run. My 5-second question should be less than a 20-second answer. Campaign finance data has been deleted from early years. Will it be added back into the system?
Yes, it will be. It was just, yes.
Okay.
By April, it's going to come in, all the old data. It was, yeah.
Wonderful. Great timing too. And then last question, I'm coming back to this committee after being off for some time, but I remember when I was on this committee last, you had Marylanders with disabilities, more specifically from the blind community, who were speaking about the disenfranchisement of their votes because of a lack of electronic ballot return process. And so just curious if you can give briefly an update. I'm happy to follow up offline, but I was just curious about that.
There's a lot to that question there. So with ballot, we do still offer online ballot, electronic delivery of the ballots. They have to print it. There's security elements here. I've always worked with the National Federation of the Blind for any new technologies to see if anything is viable in the state of Maryland while still maintaining a high level of security. So I work with the president and call her up all the time. And the other part too was the idea of a different type of ballot styles with the online, with the ballot marking device. And that has been rectified, I believe, with the new voting system as well. So we're going to have public demonstrations in March about that as well.
Gotcha. And does this, it seems it requires the General Assembly taking action on legislation in terms of like the electronic ballot access, or am I wrong in that analysis?
For return, yes,
Okay.
yes, and any sort of changes with it would have to be through the Maryland General Assembly, yes.
Gotcha. And rightly so, security concerns. I will note that there are other states that do have sort of this ballot access system, and I don't believe any of them have really communicated any issues. So we'll try to do what we can on our end as the legislative branch, but just putting that out there because, you know, we all have constituents who are members of the blind community. And 2026, we're talking 2028 elections.
Right.
We want to make sure that everyone has access to the ballot and can return it safely and securely. So appreciate it.
We just want to implement whatever you guys do. You make the policies, we'll implement it. So that's our job.
Appreciate that, Administrator Damaris. Thank you to you and your team. And this ends our budget hearing. Thank you.